Okay, hello and welcome to the Yorkshire Rose. Today I'd really like to talk to you guys about the points of sail. So the points of sail are to do with the boat's angle in relation to the wind. So for example, whether the wind is coming to the side of the boat or from the back of the boat or from the very front of the boat, we as sailors really need to know where the wind is coming from at all times and the angle at which the wind is coming to the boat, because that allows us to know what we should be doing with our sail trim. So there are 5 points of sail, all in all, and these are kind of pretty old words. They go back at least sort of 400 or 500 years, a lot of them, to refer to specific points of sail, specific angles of the boat in relation to the wind. There's 5 points of sail and 6 if we include this zone up here called the no-go zone. I think one of the first things to understand is that a boat can never be pointing directly up into the wind. So on this little board here, I want you to imagine that these little blue arrows are the wind coming down the bottom of the board, okay? And these are all boats pointing in different directions. In other words, they're on different points of sail, because if you think about it, the wind is going to be hitting at different angles here, okay? So the main thing to remember, the first thing to remember, I think, is that a boat can never point directly up into the wind, okay? To do that would be to be in the no-go zone. In other words, the boat isn't going to go anywhere, the sails are going to flap, and eventually the boat might even start drifting backwards this way. Okay, so a boat can never point directly into the wind. The old English sailor term for that is to be stuck in irons. It's like to be stuck in the chains, to be stuck in irons, because if you have a boat up here, pointed right up into the wind, obviously it just can't go anywhere, okay? But, believe it or not, a boat can actually go surprisingly close to the wind. A boat, in other words, can go up this way, point right up here, even if the wind is coming this way. So even if the wind is coming like almost straight towards the bow of the boat, a boat can still head up into the wind. So this first point of sail here, we call this a close haul, because it's close to the wind, okay? It's right on the edge of that no-go zone. And haul, because we haul in the sails really tight. Haul, if you remember last week's lesson, we talked about the halyard, right? That old sailor term for pulling in. So we haul in the sails as tight as possible when we're on a close haul. The other way we could say this is that the sails are going to be out 0%. So these two boats, by the way, are on the same point of sail. This is a close haul and this is a close haul. The only difference is that here the wind is coming to the port side, right? If you remember last week's lesson, it's coming to the left-hand side of the boat if we're facing the front of the boat, marked by this little red dot here. Here it's going to the starboard side. So in other words, this boat, we call this boat being on a port tack or a port close haul. Here it's on a starboard close haul because the wind is coming to the starboard side of the boat. So this sail needs to be out 0%. You see that boom? This pink line is the boom. This orange line is supposed to be the jib. Think of it in as tight as it possibly can go. In other words, it's out 0%. The complete opposite of a close haul is this point of sail down here, okay? This point of sail here is called a run. So when we're on a run, we're going to let out our sails 100%, like so, okay? Let them right out to catch all that wind. Let's wind it back a little bit. One way to think about a sail and the wind is to think of a sail as being like a net and the wind as being like all these little fishies, okay? So in order to catch all these fish that are coming down this way, we need to have our net out at the right angle, right? In other words, if our net, let's say it's not out like this, it's in really tight like this, like we're on a close haul, we're not going to catch any fish, right? We need to have it out fully when we want to run in order to catch as many fish as possible, the fish that are coming down, and keep that sail generally at the angle, a 90-degree angle to the wind, so they can catch all those fish to blow the boat forwards. And it's the same with a close haul. Close haul, we've got it in as tight as possible, because if we let it out completely, we ease the sail right out, we don't get to catch those fish, okay? Kind of makes sense? So a close haul, in as tight as possible, in other words, out 0%. On a run, it's going to be out 100%, okay? Now, directly in between a close haul and a run, we have this beam reach here, okay? A beam reach is when the wind is coming directly across the beam of the boat. So back in the olden days, when boats were made out of wood, you'd have these horizontal beams that would go straight across the boat like this, okay? So we call that a beam reach because the wind is going straight along that beam, straight across that beam. Now, given the fact that a beam reach is directly in between a close haul and a run, and that a close haul we're going to let ourselves out 0%, and a run we're going to let ourselves out 100%, and this is halfway in between, what percent do you think we let out a beam reach? Have a think about it. How much should we be letting ourselves out for a beam reach? Some of you may have guessed it. It's going to be 50%. 50%, okay? Now, by the same token, we can talk about a run, right, where the wind is coming directly behind the boat. We're going to let ourselves out 100%. We can talk about a beam reach, where the wind is coming straight to the beam. We're going to let out 50%. In between a run and a beam reach, we talk about a broad reach, okay? So here, if you see, the wind is still coming behind the boat, okay? It's mostly from the stern and as opposed to the bow, right? It's mostly coming from behind here, but it's at a slight angle, okay? It's heading out at a slight angle down this way, okay? So we call this a broad reach. Now, if a beam reach is 50% and a run is 100% and a broad reach is in between, it's going to be what? It's going to be 75%, right? So 75%, like so, okay? Now, we have here a close reach, okay? Close reach because it's in between a close haul and a beam reach, okay? So we take one word from close haul, close, and we take one word from the beam and we call it a close reach, okay? So here the boat is pointing up into the wind. They are making upwind progress, in other words, they're going up towards where the wind is coming from, but not as tight as being on a close haul. A close haul, you're really trying to get as close into the wind as you possibly can. You sheet everything in and you just try and aim up into the wind as much as possible. On a close reach, you are sailing upwind, but not quite as much, okay? So if a close reach is directly in between a beam reach and a close haul, you might see where this is going, and a close haul is 0% and a beam reach is 50%, what might a close reach be in percentage? 25%, right? It's going to be 25%, okay? So let's recap quickly, okay? A boat can never point directly into the wind, okay? If a boat ever gets stuck directly into the wind, head into wind, we call that the no-go zone, okay? Because the boat won't go anywhere. That whole zone is an area where the boat just can't move, okay? But if the boat is on the very outside, then we call that a close haul, because it's close to the wind, but we need to haul in the sails as much as possible. If we don't haul in our sails really, really tight, when we're right on the edge of the wind, then the boat won't go anywhere, the sails will just flap, okay? So for example, if the sails are out like this, down here, you can imagine, can't you, how all the fish would just escape, right? They're all just going to escape down, okay? In order to catch those fish with our net, in other words, in order to catch the wind with our sail, we have to have it out 0%, okay? Then we have a close reach. We're still pointing upwind, but not quite as much as a close haul. It's going to be out 25%. A beam reach, because it's coming straight across the beam of the boat, and the beam was the old word for the bits of wood that would go straight across the boat. A beam reach, and we let out about 50%. Broad reach, we're sailing downwind at this point, okay, but it's still coming slightly from the side. The wind is going to be hitting about here, isn't it? The wind's going to hit, if you imagine these arrows, they're going to hit about here, right? So that's 75%, okay? And then we have a run. 100% out. One of the things that's significant about a run is that generally, when you're sailing, your jib, in other words, that sail we talked about last week, the sail at the front of the boat, and your mainsail generally are going to be on the same side. But when you're on a run like this, in order to maximize the wind, if you think about the wind coming down this way, okay, in order to maximize the wind, we actually want to put them on opposite sides, okay? The English word for that is very poetic. The English word is a goose wing, okay? To be on a goose wing, because it looks like a beautiful goose, and the geese use their wings to sail along the water sometimes. So we call it a goose wing. The Americans call it a wing on wing, I think. I prefer goose wing personally. I think it's got more poetry behind it, you know? So goose wing here, right? So we let out the jib on one side and the main on the other side. Generally, they're going to be on the same side, okay? the close haul, our sails are in as tight as possible. Once they're in as tight as possible, the main thing we're just trying to do is to stop the sails from luffing, because if the sail starts luffing, that means like shaking around, then it means that we're pointing right up into that no-go zone, okay? So with a close haul, we tend to want to have our sails in as tight as possible, so that we can get as close up into that wind. That's a general overview. Now I know that's quite a lot of information to take on, so if you look in the link section down below this video, you'll see that I've put a few resources out there, including a nice, very clear points of sail diagram for you guys to follow. And then there's also another link for a game that we're going to play, in which we're going to make a points of sail pie. So once you've watched this video and you know a little bit about your points of sail, we can do the next video, which will be a kind of crafty game where we're going to make a points of sail pie, okay? Don't worry if you can't take on all this information. Especially if you've never actually been out on a boat before, I'm kind of overloading you guys with a lot of information. Generally speaking, we would just all get on a boat and a lot of this stuff would make more sense once we were out on a boat, okay? So don't worry if this is quite a lot. I wanted to do this firstly as a kind of recap to some of our younger sailors who were here last year, and then just to introduce you guys who are coming into the camp this year to the basic concept of points of sail. Remember, the basic idea behind a points of sail is just what is the boat doing in relation to the wind? Is the wind coming right from the bow up here, like a close haul, or right from the very front, like we're stuck in the no-go zone, or is it coming straight behind us, so we're on a run? That's the kind of basic concept. And all this stuff will become a lot more apparent when we actually, hopefully soon, get out on the water for the summer camp, okay?